everybody, this is Joe. Good day. Well, I've been tinkering around with this 3-section, 3-compartment pinhole camera that you saw the last, 3 videos, me building this, designing, building it, and testing it. And you might remember the first images on Harman direct positive paper were pretty contrasty, and you know, in the middle of the image you get pretty good exposure, I guess, in the middle of each one, but in the center or the outer edge, it's not nearly as good. Really a lot of light fall off. And I had been thinking, I don't know, initially didn't know if it was maybe the pinhole was designed wrong. Maybe it's cut blocking the light around the edge, so it's vignetting too much. But then I remembered that I didn't pre-flash this Harman direct positive paper, and I've been working with the Harman paper for a long time, and but it seems that because it's been out of stock or hard to get, the availability has been difficult. I haven't been using it as much in the last year or so as I have in the previous few years, so I've kind of forgotten some of my key learnings, some of the things I've learned about it. So several things about Harman paper: you really do have to pre-flash it to get the shadow details, and secondly, you have to use fresh developer. And like paper negatives, I can get away with reusing a used developer over and over again, and it actually works pretty good to control the contrast. But Harman requires fresh developer. Not only fresh in the sense of not previously used, but your bottle of liquid concentrate, if you're using liquid concentrate like I am, you have to make sure it's not expired. And I think I have both of those problems going on. But what I did was I did another round of tests this morning. I took my wife out to breakfast to the Range Cafe in Bernalillo, north of Albuquerque. And after we ate, which was, my meal was chicken fried steak with green chili gravy and eggs. And after that, we went to this little park nearby, near the old sawmill in Bernalillo. And I made a little triptych of images. And this was with Harman paper, and it was pre-flashed. Now, the other complication to all this is that my pre-flashing light source is a timer in my darkroom, and I don't know if the timer is affected by the cold. I don't know if the 3.5 seconds is accurate. But anyways, I rated the ISO at 8 instead of 10. Again, I pre-flashed it, and I used my meter, calculated exposure. It's a little bit overexposed, actually, for my taste. This first image on your left is, if I can focus, is right on the edge of the park. There's a wall with a bunch of murals, and this is like a little shrine, this is kind of a tradition in northern New Mexico, is family or community chapels or shrines. It kind of dates back to the Spanish era in New Mexico. Anyways, that was that. And then the middle image is the sawmill, and it's a conical shaped structure. And it looks far away, but I was right up close to the fence, and so I still have to learn how to frame this super wide angle pinhole camera. I was thinking about maybe making a little cardboard wedge that I could use, either putting it on the side of the camera to point the, to get an idea of where the framing lines are, or just carry it around with me and use it to sight how close I need to be to the subject. But anyways, it's pretty close up. And then this third image here is, I don't know how close I can get to focusing here on this lens. This third image is the left side of that shrine building, and there are some murals there, and there's a tree. I didn't even think I would get this tree in the shot. It was off to the right, and of course the image is reversed left to right. But yeah, this camera is super wide angle. But anyway, I had fun with it. The lid, I noticed when I was walking back to my vehicle, the lid was a little loose, like kind of, you could see it moving, and so I'm thinking I need to put some rubber bands around around it. I built it so snug I didn't know if it was ever going to loosen up, but apparently it has. So the lesson here is these initial tests, these high contrast images that I initially got, were probably the result of simply not pre-flashing the paper, and it makes a remarkable difference in the tonal range. From what was way too much contrast is now almost not enough contrast, although I think what it is the shadows, the shadow detail. Well, let me see. Let me analyze this a minute. Is it the Harman paper? Is it the developer? Is it the exposure? Well, let's look at it again. Notice the little border between the images has nice dark tones, okay? And maybe a little bit here. You see those dark shadows? That tells me that the developer was okay. And so I think what it is I must have overexposed in the camera somehow. Maybe even fogged. Is it possible if the lid was open it would fog? It just doesn't look like it because usually you get fogging around the edge instead of in the center of the image. But it's going to take some more tests. But anyways, it looks like it's a really wide angle pinhole. It's a flat image, but it looks like it works pretty good if you pre-flash the Harman paper. Okay, I've beaten that horse to death. Now, I'm going to make a whole nother video about this next subject matter, but I wanted to kind of give you a preview on it. And you might remember this 3-section pinhole camera with an image format size of 2.5-inch square was based on or inspired by my little 9 film canister pinhole cameras, little kit of, and it uses smaller size squares of paper, 1 3/4 inch. And I was wanting to kind of do the same thing on the 2.5-inch size squares, have individual one-shot cameras and carry them around with me. And so I went to the hardware store the other day and I found 1.5 inch diameter PVC pipe. I found a 5-foot section that was about the shortest I could find at the hardware store where I went to, and a handful of pipe caps. I actually bought all the pipe caps they had in stock, 14 of them. So I have enough pipe caps to make 7 of these cameras right now. So it's extremely easy to make this camera. To do a good job, you need a power miter saw. You could use a hacksaw and a hand saw, but you basically cut a 3-inch section of PVC pipe, and with a good miter saw, you should be able to get a good clean cut. And then you're going to cut a 1/2 inch diameter hole on the side with a Forstner bit. And it looks like 1/2 inch might be a little small. Some of my images had some corner vignetting, so you might have to go with 5/8 of an inch. And then you need a piece of brass big enough to cover that hole. You make your pinhole, which was a quarter of a millimeter, roughly 0.25 millimeters. And it's taped on the inside with a long strip of gaffer's tape. And that's the camera. That's it. 2 caps, not even glued together. One of them isn't even glued on. You just press them on. I use a piece of gaffer's tape as a shutter. You can't get any simpler than that. And I set the camera on my platform, on my tripod. I just set it like this. So it has an angle of view. The wrap of the paper inside the pinhole is almost 180 degrees. And you wouldn't think you'd get any kind of image at a 180 degree angle of view, but you'd be surprised. Let me show you here. So the very first image from this camera was yesterday afternoon near sunset. The light was fading and I barely got the camera done. And my neighbor's house, there was a tree along the side of our house, and let me focus this. And the sunlight is on the tree. The trunk of the tree is already in the shade. This is his wall. But this is, again, this kind of high, super high contrast light where there's no shadow detail. And I had processed this paper, this Harman paper, the same way that I did that original triptych out of the other camera. I didn't pre-flash it. But then, last night, after it was dark, I decided, heck, it must be pre-flashing. So I did another test with this same camera, but because it was dark out, I had to do a still life scene. So I set up in my studio here on my table, I set up a little still life, and I used these 2 video lights that are just LED light bulb kind of lights, probably daylight balanced. I rated the paper one stop slower, so ISO 6 instead of ISO 8, and it turned out to be an exposure time of about 24 minutes. So let me show you this. I'm particularly proud of this image, and if I can get my camera to focus. Now this is really cool. This is one of these little articulating artistic model things that you see at craft stores or art stores. You can bend it. It has a little metal pole post and a support base. And it was sitting on my table. This is that 3-section camera in front of it. This is my closet doors behind it. But you see these two little funny flares of light from either side. Well, those were the video lights illuminating this model, and they were almost 180 degrees apart from each other. They're literally on the side of the camera. And so you get a sense of the super wide angle nature of this camera when you see that. But I really like this image, and it inspires me to start working more with these still life images at nighttime or indoors. You know, you can set up a still life, artificially light it, not worry about daylight and all that stuff. And a still life isn't going to move on you. It's going to work fine, you know, if it takes 25 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever. But I really like the quality of this image, and it really shows promise for the curved film plane camera. So I also did another test today with the little pipe camera with pre-flashed Harman paper, fresh developer, and this was the same subject matter from the other day, the little metal ornamental crow slash raven slash whatever kind of bird it is. But anyways, I thought it was cool, and it looks like that little camera works okay. I think I had a little bit of vignetting on the corners, and so that 1/2-inch diameter hole that's in the side of this pipe might be a little too small. I might have to make it bigger, or it would be a little more difficult to try to cut that into a square hole. But anyways, it needs to be probably a little bit bigger than that. So I think the pre-flashing does make a difference with this paper. Now when I was designing, sketching out ideas for this little pipe, PVC pipe camera prototype, I made a scale model here of the camera, drew it to scale as much as I could. This was mainly to figure out what size hole I'd need to drill on the side. But I noticed that from measuring the focal length, it's about a 40 millimeter focal length from the pinhole to the center of the paper on the opposite wall. But it's only about 35 or 37 millimeters from the pinhole to the edge of the paper because of the way it wraps. And so you can see that the light fall off toward the edge of the paper isn't nearly as severe as if it was a flat film plane. And that's one of the things I really like about these curved film plane cameras. Plus the kind of distortion it gets is really kind of cool. But this was a really startling image, and just exceptionally exciting to have this running guy with this electric kind of lights on either side of him. It just was really cool. I was very much encouraged. So I'm going to be doing another video about this, how to make these. They're very simple, and I have right now enough materials, enough pipe caps to build 7 of these, and I want to probably, I think that 5 foot, what did I calculate, 60 inches, 3 inches, let's say 3.5. So you could probably make 17 of these cameras with a 5 foot section of PVC pipe if you had 34 pipe caps. But anyways, this is Joe Van Cleve, and the whole purpose of this video is just to remind you, when you're using Harman direct positive paper in pinhole cameras, make sure you pre-flash the paper to get your shadow detail. It's not necessarily always the camera at fault. Okay, until next time, you guys have yourselves a great day.